Good evening, everyone, and once again, thank you for joining me for this June the 12th edition of the Look into the Holy Book Devotional. I am your host, Charles Logan, and once again, welcome. It is a privilege to be able to share these thoughts with you tonight. Well, I'm going to start out our time together this evening by doing something that I usually don't do, and that's read somebody else's words. You know, they are words of Josh McDowell. Now, some of you may know him. I don't follow his ministry and I don't know anything about him, but his words struck a chord with me, uh, especially when thinking about tonight's devotional. It's called Nice Guys Finish Last, but Not Always. And besides that, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, my own experiences tonight. And I know that you're not really supposed to do that, but I've made so many mistakes, I hope that someone out there will profit by what I've done in the past. So, the Bible reading is from Luke 14:7. It goes like this: "The proud will be humbled, but the humbled will be honored." It's your turn to make the play of the game. You're ready, you're set, you're going to do your best. And then you glance at the basketball coach. He flashes you a sign that says, "Play dirty." You realize that he wants you to trip the opponent. Now maybe you have a coach like the Lip DeRocher. He played shortstop for several major baseball league teams in the 1930s and the 1940s, and then he became a manager. But he is most famous for saying, "Nice guys finish last." Now, DeRocher expected his players to win at any cost, including kicking and clawing and biting and bumping. But compare Leo DeRocher with another Major League Baseball player, Orel Hershiser. Now, he was the pitching ace of the 1988 World Champion Los Angeles Dodgers. He won 23 games that year and pitched a record-setting 59 innings with no scores against him. He was voted most valuable player in the World Series and the National League's best pitcher of the year. Orel Hershiser was a nice guy, and he's a Christian. After setting that scoreless innings record, he knelt on the mound to thank God. In the locker room after the final World Series game, he told reporters that he had sung hymns to himself during the game to stay calm. On national television that night, he said, "This isn't a religious show, but I want to thank God." You know, I've been told many times that I'm a really nice guy. And I'm not sure that I like being called nice. I think back a long time ago when I was just starting junior high school. Along with that came a brave new world. I was no longer a kid in grade school using crayons and reciting my ABCs. I was now a junior high schooler. There were socials and dances and there were girls and lots of girls. I had a new appreciation for the opposite sex and I couldn't wait to call a girl for a date. Of course, those kinds of times required a chaperone to drive, but it was still a new and exciting experience. You know, I was entering a new world. As I said, I had just finished 4 years at Trinity Lutheran School, a private Christian school. I was taught to be a nice guy. Respect my elders and be thankful for God's blessings, and really did not know anything other than niceness. Junior high school was worldly in the eyes of a 14-year-old. Up until that time, I had only known and had been taught to be a good Christian boy first and a grade school student second. Now, when I got into high school, I had already learned some bad language. I'd been exposed to a lot of worldly stuff. And I wanted a car more than anything else in the world. But even after being exposed to a non-Christian school for 2 years, I still went to church with my parents and every Sunday attended Sunday school, and I was told on many occasions that I was really a nice young man. High school was dances and football and general assemblies where the boys that were involved in sports wore white shirts as a tradition and to show off their manliness. I was a nice Christian young man, and that is what I wanted everyone to know about me. I remember my first attempt at dating. I was so nervous that it must have shown in my voice. When I made that first call to Sally, she was the most beautiful thing that I had ever seen. Friendly, gregarious, and a cheerleader. With high hopes, I asked her out for a date. It was my first real test of manhood. She responded with an emphatic no. I was crushed, so much that I remember that answer to this day. Well, she did go out, but with one of the football players. She took excitement and aggression over niceness. I learned a very important lesson that day. Under certain circumstances, nice guys do finish last. You know, we live in a culture of aggressiveness, fight to be first, climb over others to get to the top of that corporate ladder, even if you have to do some things that are not considered to be fair. That saying, nice guys finish last, was something that was always on one's mind and represented a stumbling block to success, actually. It was the strong, aggressive, and sometimes self-centered individual that seemed to get the best jobs, the most attractive wives, and the center table at all of the important social gatherings. Well, I'm still a nice guy. I'm a devoted Christian, and I am involved in ministries where I try to place others' needs ahead of my own. I think to myself, are people like me destined to finish last in a society that places great value on aggressiveness and intimidation? Now, I was reading about Dale Earnhardt the other day. He's considered one of the greatest NASCAR competitors of all time. Talk about aggressiveness. On the racetrack, he was called the Intimidator because of his take-no-prisoners attitude of winning. He was a bully on the track and feared because of his determination to win at any cost. He was never called a nice guy that I know of, and yet he is considered a role model, respected and remembered by many, even 23 years after his fatal accident. Now, Leo DeRocher also said, winning also requires toughness and ruthlessness. And he also said, show me a good loser and I'll show you an idiot. In our culture, gentleness and kindness are not the first traits to be considered worthy of celebration. But being a Christian and a nice guy are traits that Jesus would have recognized and he would have honored. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. You know, I'm afraid that even today we equate greatness with being meek and mild. Over time, greatness has taken, gentleness for being taken meek and mild. And over time, gentleness is taken to be understood as something negative, like weakness. You know, we look up to those who place themselves first. Where is the thought of Christian charity in the likes of people like Lance Armstrong, who claimed he healed himself of cancer and that God had no part in it? And then there's professional golfer Tiger Woods, who said, while alluding to his lifestyle, by the way, that he did not want to be looked at as a role model. Yet these people are looked up to and applauded for their nonconformist, free thinking independence in the face of traditional values. Gentleness And placing the needs of others above oneself is not just making kindness a priority in one's life. It is a spiritual gift. We're gifted spiritual gifts at the time of our conversion to be used for the benefit of the body, strengthening the body of believers, that is Christ's church on earth. If we trust Jesus and practice gentleness and kindness by his example, we can then treat others with the same gentleness and kindness and comfort them through our demonstration of our love for them. You know, the Apostle Paul writes in Galatians 6:9, and let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. As you know, nice Christian guys get a lot of criticism. We finish last because we're too kind and considerate in life and in relationships. That places us at a disadvantage compared to those who are naturally aggressive and ruthless, seeing something that they want and not letting anything or anyone stand in their way. True to our culture, they are the ones that are remembered and admired. And what about that word trust? Nice guys are too trusting and have a tendency to take people at their word. What they are remembered for is letting people take advantage of them and letting people walk all over them. Think about this. You see in someone an opportunity for monetary gain, let's say. You don't know much about the individual, yet you place your trust and your money with him. Oh, there are certain flags warning about the investment, but you go ahead and you trust that you, with the trust that you placed in him. Well, things go sideways and you lose your money. What do you do as a nice guy and a Christian? Well, first of all, I believe that it's a matter of discernment, first of all. If the flags were there and you went ahead with the deal anyway, then you have made a bad judgment call. Do you hang your head? Do you turn around and walk away? Or do you pray for clearer discernment and wisdom and profit by your mistake? You know, if it is a matter of trusting someone and feeling betrayed, resulting in a loss of your investment, what do you do as a nice guy and a Christian? You can't really blame that person that you put your trust in because it was your decision. No one twisted your arm. You can get angry, of course, but the anger should be directed inward. You can hold a grudge, but that's just not how Christians respond to these things. And you can file a lawsuit, which, well, nothing needs to be said about that. In any situation where there is a risk that requires placing your trust in someone, we have to ask ourselves, am I being wise? Will this decision ultimately honor God? When you think about it, though, would you rather be suspicious of everyone, unable to trust anyone for fear that they were out to take advantage of you? You know, God doesn't want us to be timid. He doesn't want us to be afraid of our own shadow and trusting of no one. He doesn't want a constantly paranoid individual who has to look around each corner anticipating a threat. How could we ever be a witness for him if that were ever the case? But neither does he want us to be so trusting that people know that you're an easy mark and play you for a fool all the time. This is where your God-given discernment comes in. You know, God has given us a wonderful mind, and one that we must use to make judgments that help us to avoid mistakes in trusting the wrong people. So God just plain doesn't want his children to be wimpy. Now, while wimpy isn't a biblical word, the Bible's clear and that God wants us to be courageous and strong and faithful. And he encourages us not to be timid as well. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear or timidity, but of power and love and self-discipline." So you will be called a nice guy. You may not like it, but in reality, I would hope that you would want to be known as a sensitive, trustworthy, and empathetic person. I may never, it may never get you to the center table at social events, and maybe you won't be remembered for your adventurous spirit and win at all cost attitude. But as for me, my ministries, my concern for others, and my desire to be a servant, not a leader, is what is important in my life. Now, I firmly believe that God has called each of us to a ministry, whether it is to travel to foreign lands and reach out to the lost with the gospel, or to live a quiet life as an example of God's love. I believe that we should comfort those who are in distress, empathize with those who are hurting, and trust only those who are deserving of our trust. We are to be humble and respectful and not timid or afraid, even if we live a life in relative obscurity, as long as we live that life for Christ. And as a final word, we will probably be criticized for being a pushover, a doormat, or trusting those we shouldn't. Even though we will get taken advantage of at times, we have made an effort to exercise the greatest of all commandments. That is to love God, love our neighbor as yourself, and reach out to others in kindness and understanding. Trust that God will give you discernment and wisdom, and ask yourself if what I do and how I respond to any given circumstance bring honor to Him, even if the nice guy in me comes in last. Well, thank you once again for sharing this time with me this evening. I hope that you've been able to glean a little bit of something good out of this time together. So once again, I am Charles Logan, wishing each and every one of you a very pleasant rest of the week, and Lord willing, until we get again together again next Thursday for the Look Into the Holy Book Devotional. Until then, I wish you good evening, and thank you.